Hello everyone. Welcome. I see people are coming online. It's wonderful to see you and be with you. Welcome to the second in a series of Satsangs with Richard Harvey. My name is Rob Meager and I've been gifted the opportunity to moderate today's Satsangs. And as with the first Satsang in the series, they offer a unique opportunity to sit in truth with our spiritual teacher, Richard Harvey. Satsangs are an ancient way for the wisdom teacher to impart clarity of what is real in your life. And sitting with sincerity, with willingness to pacify the thirst for truth, is a key factor to learn and move your inner perception forward. Just a couple of administrative items before we begin. I'm going to ask everyone if you're able to turn off your video cameras during the satsang. You'll be invited to turn on your video when you have a question for Richard. And I'm also going to invite you to mute your microphone for the duration of the satsang. Because we are recording the satsangs, if you can mute your microphone, it will help reduce any background noise and make the call more audible for everyone. And if you do have a question for Richard, you'll simply be invited to turn on your microphone and enjoy your inquiry with Richard. I'll close the satsang at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time or 6 p.m. Central European Summer Time. I know all of you are joining us again and may already be familiar with Richard, but for those who may be viewing this recording and being with us for the first time, I just want to provide a little bit of background of Richard Harvey. He's a psychospiritual psychotherapist and spiritual teacher. His work emerged out of the human potential movement of the 1970s. He trained with many teachers in humanistic and transpersonal approaches. He is the founder of Sacred Attention Therapy, a radical new approach to inner work for the 21st century that proposes a three-stage model of human awakening. Richard is the author of Your Essential Self and the Flight of Consciousness, among many other publications. He works with people all around the world, and his next book will be published later this year and is entitled Your Sacred Calling. And could I now invite Richard to come on screen so everyone can see you? Hello, Richard. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm well. I want to begin. I'm going to invite us to begin with a selection of questions that have been previously submitted. And Richard, I'm going to turn my video off so that the focus is on you. And the first question that's been submitted, an interesting one, it asks, is there an ongoing shift of consciousness taking place on the planet? Is there an ongoing shift of consciousness taking place on the planet?
Is there an ongoing shift of consciousness taking place on the planet? We'll distinguish. We have to chop this a little bit between what we might call consciousness with a small c and consciousness with a capital C. Look, consciousness doesn't change. Consciousness doesn't shift. It doesn't evolve. It doesn't increase or decrease or in any way modulate, irregardless of how many molecules or human beings or planets there are on the known and unknown universes and the 10,000 realms. Consciousness is absolute. We're talking now of the C consciousness, the big one. And what we have to straighten up about this idea of a shift or awakening or the 10,000 people or the 100th monkey or whatever the model is we have to distinguish the drama and the evolving storyline from the absolute. The absolute traditionally called God, and God is beyond knowing. God is beyond seeing, because you can't objectify God. You can't objectify the absolute because you are the absolute. You are God. You cannot see yourself. There is no separation. There's no objectifying. There's no reflection. There's ultimately no awareness. It just is. So on this level of spiritual consciousness, or should I say absolute consciousness, the one with the big C, nothing's happening. Nothing ever was happening, and nothing's going to ever be happening. That's the wonder of it. That's the mystery of it. And that's why we can attain spiritual liberation. There's other kind of liberations, there's other kinds of enlightenments, and there's other kinds of awakenings, but they're kind of in another realm. And the other realm that they're in is this one that we're, all of us, because we're in a human form, have a familiarity with. We wake up in the morning, we go to bed at night, we have lunch, we have a haircut, we interact with people, we do things, and we have some kind of job, and of course we eat and we eliminate and all these things. So all of these familiar progressive or processes of human life and interaction are a kind of drama in which we superimpose various ideas according to our views and our thoughts, our opinions and so on. Thus, this is by no means the first time in human history, in recorded history, shall we say, or even pre-recorded history, when there hasn't been an idea of an awakening, there hasn't been an idea of a progressive shift in some ways, and maybe we've had these shifts in the age of the Enlightenment, the other eras that have been defined in terms of expansion of consciousness, evolving human beings and so on. I mean, clearly we've changed and evolved in all kinds of ways. Nonetheless, at this point, I suggest, this is a satsang, we're talking about spiritual matters, and the idea of the shift, awakening, as attractive and lovely as it may be, is merely a thought. It's merely a thought. What that means is if people want to think it and want to act on it and are motivated to do it, sure, of course, there will be a shift in consciousness in the relative world, but it won't have any meaning spiritually unless we square it up against absolute consciousness, which is never changing, never moving. That is God. That is the absolute. There's no spiritual meaning in any shift or regression of consciousness in the relative world without reference to what is eternal. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question, Richard, is more oriented towards the psychological, but blends and brings the spiritual into it. Here's the question. I had a lucid dream a few nights ago where I met my soulmate. Is there a spiritual link here, or is it more based on the animus aspect of personality development as put forward by Jung? And how is personality development linked with spirituality?
It's a tailor-made question for us, isn't it, in sacred attention?
Mm-hmm.
listen, without knowing you, without talking to you and knowing more about you, I couldn't really say. There's two possibilities here which perhaps you're wrestling with. Since you know yourself better than anybody else, you can maybe consider these two options depending on your state of awareness and your psycho-spiritual progression through stages of personal evolution. And that would be to say, the meeting of your soulmate in a dream, I suggest, would first and foremost imply a meeting with the anima or the muse or the soul or that female element of you which must be integrated progressively to bring about your wholeness, your psychological wholeness. Now, if that person is somebody who's in your life, either your dream world or your waking world or both, and in which you're convinced you participate in eternity with. In other words, this relationship is not grounded experientially in a place where you have comings and goings and different kinds of emotions, but it's centered around a constant. And that constant is love, and that constant is unfathomable, positive regard, and that eternal feeling of love between you has a sense of merging or breaking down barriers of any kind of separateness or division or self-identity. If that is the case, then you have met yourself in the eternal realms, and where there is no individual, you see. There is no I. There certainly is no I and you. So if that makes sense to you, then this meeting with the soulmate could be on that level. If you find yourself in a psychological exploration primarily at this present time in your inner work, then you should address it as the female guide who you will follow unquestioningly. You know, she will, and she may appear in all kinds of forms, of course, not necessarily human, but she will guide you, and the more you listen to her and the more you unquestioningly follow wherever she leads, the faster you're going to achieve wholeness.
What about that aspect of the question, Richard, that asks, and how is personality development linked with spirituality?
Oh, yeah, sorry. My approach is sacred attention therapy, and in that we have 3 stages of this. In the first, you unpack the remedial material that is, so to speak, left over from the past. Childhood and early life experience. It's the way in which you organize the relationship to life and to people in life, and arrived at certain kinds of positions in regard to life and defended yourself from experience. And all of this has to be unpacked to even begin to realize character and personality. This is an ideal. In a more intelligent and widely led culture, I would have it that by the time we're 21, we've released childhood and teenage years and adolescent issues. This is, so to speak, how it would be naturally if we had intelligent, wise people to mentor and to guide us. However, most people don't let go of the unfinished business of childhood and early years for the whole rest of their lives. It's a great tragedy. So having let go of that, and I'd refer you to Your Essential Self or Human Awakening, which details this and to some degree how to do this. Sacred attention therapy goes further on the practical issue of how to do this. You blossom into the human life which is the life of the heart and authenticity and compassion. It's a dimensional shift. You become yourself. You blossom or flower into the being that you really are without any reference whatsoever to the past. Past is dead. You are fully alive. And at this point, if you're so inclined, and we should consider that unlike the popular view of spirituality, far fewer people are seriously inclined toward spirituality per se, or towards the spiritual journey, because there's really nothing in it for you at all. Nothing. There's nothing in it for you. And it's very difficult for us, most people we know, to say, would you like to be involved in this thing? And they say, well, why would I? Or what's in it for me? And the answer is absolutely nothing. You see. And so I've tried to map out what happens from this heart-centered state of authenticity and compassion, where you would want to enter into the preparatory stage of serious spiritual life in the world, where you would want to enter into the ceremony or the ritual of dying in the world in order to be born in the spirit, or to be born into impersonal love, or to swim in the ocean of consciousness. And when and if that's the case, and it certainly isn't something you think or you design in some way, it's given you. It's given. If it's given you, then you enter into a period of preparation, which we talked about somewhat in a set of talks called the Novenas. And here you clearly see very important aspects of life in a totally different way, so that you can reformulate them to become integrated and stabilized in the beginning of a lifelong sadhana. Sadhana, the way I use it, means spiritual discipline. And sadhana, again, in the way I use it, is not optional or part-time. It's perpetual. It's for the whole rest of your life and beyond. You don't stop. And so these are the three stages, and this is how personality work on the personality is connected to the sincere life of sacred spirituality.
Beautiful, thank you. Richard, one more beautiful question before I'll open it up to those who are with us on the call to share any other questions they have. So this last question before we open it up: how does one discern true from false? How does one discern true from false?
They're a lot of questions, aren't they?
They are. Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to have to be nitpicky again, really, in a way. Can we talk about it firstly on the human level? It's very difficult, isn't it, today? I mean, people are even better today, perhaps, than ever. And character and personality is so dense and complex. In my therapy practice, yours, I'm sure, Robert, and other people's who are practitioners, the idea of lying, perhaps fundamentally through not knowing oneself, or what is more mallow, more bad, as it were, would be those people who are unconsciously, but it's built in their character to be deceptive. And there are aspects of character structure whereby people do lead deceptive lives. Now, if you happen to be intuitive and plugged into that intuition, and if you happen to practice a higher instinctual nature, by which I don't mean the animalistic instinctual nature, but the higher instincts where you kind of just know things, or you meet people and you have this sense. It might be you might be wary and there's no reason. They seem to be nice, or you might be drawn or attracted to them in some way. Any number of kinds of relationship dynamics, of course. If you have this intuition working and or higher instinct, then you can tell. If not, you have to go the long route, don't you? The long route is kind of teasing it out, analysing it, asking questions, weighing the thing up, is it or isn't it? And you don't necessarily have this inner gauge about truth or falsehood. So that's the long way, but maybe the analytical way is the thorough way. I'm really not sure. I don't really have it. It seems like the long way round to me. So I would suggest, broadly speaking, we have two things going on. We have those people who just have gut instinct or higher intuition, and we have those people who think it through in order to discern truth from falsehood, which, by the way, may be ultimately somewhat facile. Do you follow? Because maybe there's always a little piece of falsehood in the truth, and maybe there's a little bit of truth in the falsehood. Maybe it's not quite so black and white, even so.
Mm-hmm.
So setting all that to one side now, which is the relative world of time and space and relationships and arising forms and so forth, is truth and falsehood in spirituality. And this is much more straightforward, I guess. And it is that you take away and you take away and you take away and you take away, and unceasingly you take away until everything that you cannot take away, everything that remains, whatever's still there when you've finished, is truth. Everything has to go. Every thought you have about God or the absolute, every feeling, every experience you've had, every attachment, every kind of relationship that you imagine, it all has to go, and you enter into complete and absolute, utter freedom. You are free of any impurities, in the sense that a thought precedes your perception, or a feeling is attached to some kind of relationship. There's no personality involved anymore. There's no separate position or individual perspective whatsoever. Take it away, take it away, take it away, until there's nothing between you and truth. And if you can't shift it, and if you're sure that you're not holding on to anything, even yourself, what remains is truth.
That's beautiful. It has me wanting to ask you another question coming out of that. I'm going to hold it and open the space at this time for others on the call to share their questions and their inquiry and dialogue with you, Richard. And either for those who are on the call, you can indicate your intention to ask Richard a question by typing your name in the Skype message center. That will tell me you have a question. Alternatively, you can just wait for a pause and turn on your microphone and or your video and ask the question for Richard. And I know there are a couple of other questions that have come forward from participants who are with us today, so they may wish to ask those questions that they had previously submitted and know haven't been asked to this point. So I'll just open it up now for anyone to share their questions with you, Richard.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi.
Carla. Hi, Cara.
Can you hear?
Very well. Here and
So this was beautiful. As Rob said, take it away, take it away. And thank you for that. It really resonated with me. The other day that you helped, I could just see that there was something that had been troubling me in the meeting that I had. And when you helped me see that you can let this go now. Thank you for that. And just for me, it's being open to seeing what feels not like truth, like you say, not like my nature, and then take it away, let it go, and just let go of that.
just
Thank
let go.
you. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. This is beautiful.
Likewise, Carla. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Richard, this is Robert speaking. I want to build on this sharing about truth, that what you opened up with based on the initial question, and then what Carla just came in and shared. And my question is truth the absence of thought?
It's a start, isn't it? It's a start. And yes, maybe it's a good summary, Robert. Maybe it's a good summary. But I would again say it's the absence of all. So even don't forget thought masquerades as many other things, as feelings sometimes, as events, as relationships. I mean, a lot of, or arguably all of, one's life goes on in the realms of imagination rather than directly apprehend whatever's happening in life. There's always a thought, there's always a narrative, and there's always an image whereby our lives are not actually lived, but kind of turned into a sort of movie, a kind of false structure of some sort, with a beginning and a middle and an end, and all these other things, because we can't we can't really tolerate the immensity of this single moment of eternity that currently we're in right now. The trick, of course, is to try and have that sensibility. Your awareness will take you into this one single insight, which is there is one eternal moment and it's happening. Now in the novenas, which I referred to just now, we talked at length about now, and now is a flaky kind of idea, because now is predicated, it's founded on then and up ahead in the future, inevitably. It doesn't have any meaning without the past and without the future. This incidentally isn't, it is me talking, but I have to point out this is an ancient teaching, which is that now is as much a delusion as then, or up ahead there in the so-called future. There are three levels of delusion. Truth is found not in now, not in this present. It's merely a psychological ploy to help people with anxiety. That's about the best you can make of this idea of now, which has caught on so very drastically and powerfully, because of course people worry. People are in a state of fear. People are planning People are anxious. So to teach relaxation in a simple form by proposing that you come into now appears to be a profound spiritual teaching. It isn't. Please everybody stay with me on this one, because I know it's challenging. I know it's difficult for us, and I know that it repudiates a lot that's very popular in so-called spiritual teaching at the moment. But in ancient teachings, it's made very, very clear that now is founded on the past and the future, and all three are one delusory. They are unreality. The word, as best we can translate it, is unreality. Now isn't real. When I was in the monastery, and I'm speaking to people who may share this experience, you usually have to put in some discipline, at least if you're young or immature in some way spiritually. What would happen every now, because we would be doing Zazen the whole time, and what would happen every now and again is there was nothing, just like that, you see, a space. There was nothing to recall, there was nobody there. I would fall through the cracks. And when I returned, I would think, well, that's funny. And I'd have no reference point whatsoever to what happened. It certainly wasn't now. We were very, very present in everything that we did in the Zen monastery. That Zen, everything was geared to awareness. But in those moments during profound meditation, hours on hours and hours and hours of meditation, every so often, for I don't know how long, because this is timeless, maybe it was a split second, maybe it was 20 minutes, I wouldn't know. You would fall through, nobody would be present, there would be this great resounding feeling when I returned, as it were. And yet none of these words make any sense whatsoever. That experience, because there's no one to experience it and there's no experience, is, was, will be, you see? You can only talk about it like this. Is, was, and will be the one single eternal moment in which you and I, we truly meet. We meet without any sense of separation, without any sense of time, without any sense of space or distance, or self-identity which distinguishes us. We don't even distinguish ourselves in that place. There's nobody, there's nothing, there's nothing to do, no one to do it, you see. So, yes, thought, but really everything, in order to establish yourself in this eternal moment. And then other people may have something to share about this or to be interested to hear. But for me, what happened progressively over time was the realization of that eternal moment stays with me persistently, so that whatever's happening in this realm of space, time and apparent relationship, really the realms of arising forms. All of them, by the way, are reflection and temporary adaptations of God. Always, always. You see God, you see the absolute in everything, but it has to be everything. It's not just a pretty flower, you see, it has to be everything. And that's what's happening out there, and you take it very lightly. And, if I meet one of you and I go up and I start talking to your shadow on the ground, you think I was rather strange, you see. Because that shadow is not as corporeal as your physical state. It's not as vital. I mean, we can kick the shadow, we could jump on it. You're not going to be hurt in your physical body, but if we lay you down and we jump on you, that's another matter. So we know, we know there what is the real thing, shall we say, and what is the reflection, or in this case the shadow. This is the same thing. We know that this world of time and space is a temporary adaptive reflection. It's adapting, it's dissolving, it's constantly dying, it's constantly being born, it's in a constant state of flux. But it isn't in and of itself the real thing. It isn't reality itself. It's a reflection.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm going to invite others to come forward and ask their questions and share their dialogue with you, Richard.
Please. Does anybody have any questions or something they'd like to share?
Richard, this is Robert speaking again. I'll come in and ask a question that was previously submitted, and it's a beautiful question, and it's again tailor-made for your teachings, because you've actually spoken to this numerous times in your lectures, and I wish I could cite and quote which lectures. I can't, because they're sprinkled throughout several of them. But here's the question. Why do I suspect that people abuse spirituality, for example, as conscious business and spiritual marketing, etc.? Why do I suspect that people abuse spirituality, for example, as conscious business and spiritual marketing, etc.?
Thanks for that question. It's I think it helps to bear in mind that what you suspect, which I believe is the case, is not a modern phenomenon. I don't think it is a modern phenomenon. I think we have it in, to take a couple of examples, we have it in the Torah, the Old Testament. We have the warning off of, what is it, witches, seers, astrologers, and so on, as false prophets. We have, I think, in Isaiah, the warning of false prophets, and closer to my heart, perhaps, in Patanjali, in his aphorisms of yoga, we have a section that's devoted to false teachings and so-called backdoor methods. So, this idea of some kind of falsehood in what's after all immaterial and invisible, and so in its own way perhaps lends itself to pretense or to almost any sort of guise, really, that may not be authentic and may be difficult to distinguish, seems to have been in place as long as recorded human history. Today, perhaps it's more prevalent because you notice that anything of value is commandeered by the corporate world or by business, or in order to make money. I mean, just everything. And so during my life, there's been, and some of your life, I'm sure here, there's been feminism, for example. I mean, that was crushed by, the true feminisms of the 70s and the 80s, which were highly intelligent and very difficult to penetrate for many people, were crushed by corporations who then said, look, we've got a female newscaster, we're feminists, we're pro-feminism or something. Complete nonsense. And these days it has gone so far that women in pornography working in the porn industry will proclaim themselves feminists because they're doing what they want to do and they're empowered, financially or physically or sexually and all this kind of thing. Anything of value seems to be reduced to money, and it seems to be more the case than ever. So I think you're right, the questioner, to suspect the way in which spirituality is packaged and sold. And all I would say is there is an argument, and that it does have some credence, that if we can see through that falsehood, perhaps we can keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. It rather depends, perhaps, to get back to the analytical versus the intuitive. I'm an intuitive type, I'm not an analytical type, regardless of what I might appear to be, and therefore the intuition helped me greatly. I didn't have to, in my spiritual progress, wrestle too much with false teachings or false teachers, because I could smell them a mile off. If you don't have that, you have to penetrate the teachings, look into them and ask a lot of questions of yourself, the teachings, the spiritual teacher and so on. Either way, it will strengthen us, doesn't it? It will strengthen us to come to a place of, let's not say certainty, but to come to a place of truth that's a reflection of truth itself. And in order to do that, there's a very simple approach, there's a very simple teaching, and that is reside in the heart. Whether you're looking for a teaching or you're seeking a teacher, or you suspect that you may be around teachings or teachers who are suspect in some way, refer to your heart, regardless of whether in personality you're analytical, intuitive, emotional, or what have you. And ask in your heart what is right, what is true. And the heart, of course, never lies. Mm-hmm. And the heart, and we're not talking, it's just so we're clear about merely the physical heart, we're talking about this energy center, we're talking about the intelligence that we carry here to discriminate what's real from what's unreal, what's true from what's false. And I think anybody today who's involved in spirituality and aware of the books and the events and the charismatic figures who are involved will have to be discerning, will have to be able to look through and say, I'm not sure, and question. Not just me, not just other teachers, but it is the ancient teaching, the most ancient teaching, to refer back to your own heart. And if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. And if you're not feeling or you're not sure what you're feeling, spend more time in the heart, you see. It's all heart. Just remain in your heart, and your heart will lead you to the right teaching and teacher that's authentic. The heart will always be simple, by the way. Never ask the heart for plan B. Right? Never ask the heart for some indirect what's going to happen after they're away. If that happens, what should I do then? It doesn't do that. An analytical mind, that's strategy. So remember, you have to learn to, maybe I'm bringing coals to Newcastle, there's a English isn't when I say this, but you have to be very simple in approach to the heart. You ask for this next present step and the heart replies immediately. So you have to learn to speak the language of the heart. When I'm working with people like this and I say, take a few breaths, put your hand on your heart and become aware of your heart now, what does your heart say? Now, one or two things is going to happen. They're going to start thinking, we've lost now, or they're going to reply straight away. It's always the immediate reply, you see. You might like it, you might not like it. You might want something more complicated and you're not going to get it, but it will be totally direct and infallible. Infallible. As we know, or should all know. We should all know that.
Are there other questions from those on the call that you'd like to ask and share with Richard at this time? Richard, it's Robert again. I have a question that is a perennial question. Comes up time and time again. In different forms, of course. The question is everyone on their spiritual path?
Is everyone on their spiritual path? It's a yes and no, isn't it? It's yes and it's no, because we will surely, from a spiritual sensibility, regard people spiritually with regard to their spiritual nature, so that we will, if we're truly spiritual, we don't merely see form and we don't merely see events. We see something beyond, we see something further, we see something invisible that animates or pervades these events or these forms, these objects, including human beings. So therefore, from our viewpoint as spiritual inclined human beings, we see everything spiritual, and at the same time you know that if you start talking spirituality to certain people, you get it in the neck, you get in trouble. You can get some violent responses to spirituality, to religion, to God talk and all of this. And that it makes us inclined perhaps to separate, doesn't it? So that these people are not on their spiritual path in some way, and these ones are, and they're whatever in the middle. And in a very real way, that has some credence too, because if somebody is earthbound, couched, grounded, stabilized in the physical world, the physical material world, and that's how they walk, that's how they talk, that's their very nature, that's what they are, it's difficult sometimes to see or to be able to say, well, they're on a spiritual path too, because there's nothing really apparent other than the fact they're breathing and moving. that will make you think that they were like you, or that you had any spiritual commonality. So it's yes and it's no. We see it that way, of course, because we see that all souls in time will surely be liberated. We couldn't bear in the heart of compassion to think that some souls would be excluded. We couldn't tolerate it in our hearts to say, well, everyone can move through across the threshold, but not these guys. Which is why we should look at it now, and we should look at the ones that are very hard to love. Very hard to love. We should look at events in the world and people we come across that are very hard to, elicit our compassion, that we have feeling for that. Very hard when we separate ourselves by saying that's absolutely awful, I can't imagine that was like, or I certainly couldn't be the perpetrator. How can you do that? Because you've separated yourself, you've divided yourself and your identity from the rest of humanity. Try not to do that. Try to extend compassion to everything, everyone, all events, because ultimately they are like the shadow. Ultimately they are the reflection. Ultimately this play of consciousness is attractive and beautiful, and it's ugly and it's disgusting. And we discern. We discern there as we discern between people being on their spiritual path or not being on their spiritual path. If we no longer have within us a space for darkness and a space for light, but truly, you have to be very self-honest about this. If we really have eliminated the shadows, dark place inside, and any forms of bigotry and prejudice and reactive tendencies inside us, if we've eliminated self-identification, and we utterly know that we're not just Richard, Robert, or Kathy, or Tula, or Carla, and so on, we truly know that, then we will see everybody on a spiritual path, because we will see outside of time, we will see in a sense that there is no path. We will see that everyone's already arrived. We'll see that nobody ever set out on a path. We will see that actually always, forever, we were here in this eternal state. There's no change in consciousness, the big C one. There's no change in truth. There's no change in the absolute. There's no change in God, ever. It is always, it is forever consciousness. So, is that a good answer? Does that answer the question?
Indeed it does. Richard, there's a beautiful question that has come in through the message center, and I want to allow it to be asked in this satsang. There's about 6 minutes left. And it's a continuation of a previous question and response. The question was around how do you discern true from false, and your primary answer invited people to focus on their heart and listen from their heart. And the question is, how do I learn to listen and learn from my heart?
The first thing I would ask is, what are you doing currently? First thing I would say is, what are you doing other than that? And I suspect that what's happening is you're centered in the mental realms, maybe the physical realms, maybe both. And in which case the first thing to do is to take away. The first thing to do is to see what you're doing, that the natural, spontaneous communion with the heart isn't taking place without any need to learn it. Maybe think of the innocence of the child pre 2.5, 3, not yet distinguished from the environment, not distinguished yet one from the other, not having a fully developed boundary of self-identification, behaving spontaneously and unpredictably, of course, and experimentally, and full of energy, full of love, full of enthusiasm, passion for life, you see. The heart then is in its rightful place. The child will immediately cry. The child will not hold back. The child that's uninhibited, that hasn't yet completely been conditioned or indoctrinated, will immediately feel their feelings, and with the feeling comes the expression. The heart's completely open. It's a flow. And left to their own devices, the child will, of course, play, will explore, will appear to love life in all sorts of ways without differentiation. Now, something happened. Something happened in our lives, in our early life experience. It may have happened long before too, and it may not have done. At some point you went from freedom to captivity, to being enslaved, to being repressed, to limitation, to something less than total communion with the heart and passion for life and openness, whereby you felt it and then you expressed it. Life was a flow. You felt it and you felt go towards it and you went there. And no father's hand, mother's arm was there to say, oh, you go there, for whatever reason. So the first thing is to ask what it is you're doing which is not natural, because to commune your heart, to be centered here, is the human natural state or condition. This is intelligence, this is wisdom. This is not something you want to enslave you. So you don't want to be thinking all the time when you need to sleep or you need to relax or you need some emptiness, and yet you know that we have all here, I'm sure, been indoctrinated in the Western mindset based on strange ideas about education, and making this part of the anatomy the boss, the highest part, as it were, whereas in reality, this should be the boss. The heart should be the boss. Now, once you come away from, through your awareness of knowing that you're centered in thought, or perhaps the physical body, or perhaps both, bring your awareness to the heart and then learn the language of the heart. And enter into relationship with the heart. You're going to become the heart. There will be two. But in the first stage, you do very much the same as whoever the questioner is. If you and I were to cultivate a personal friendship, we would have to spend time together. That's basic. In that time spent together, we would have to attend to each other in some form. We'd listen, we'd talk, we'd look, we'd sense, we'd cultivate relationship. Without that, no relationship will come about, would develop. You do exactly the same with the heart at first. You commit, you contract to spend time with the heart. You might say, I will, for 5 minutes a day, or half an hour a day, or an hour on a Saturday or whatever, you take some time with the heart and you spend time reflecting in relationship with the heart, learning to speak the heart's language, asking questions, just like you would if we were cultivating a friendship. You'd say, where are you from? What do you do? What are you about? And you ask the heart, and the heart replies. And if you can't hear it at first, you breathe, you center yourself here in the heart chakra, this part of the overall energy system that is right in the middle, the horizon of the energy systems, as above, so below, you see. And you spend time communing with the heart, and the heart requires space, stillness, and your openness to enter into that relationship.
A beautiful place to end our satsang today, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Richard, for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you to everyone for your presence here today. If you'd like to follow up with Richard, please email him at richard@therapyandspirituality.com or follow up through his website at www.therapyandspirituality.com. Our next satsang will be on Saturday, May 7th. It'll begin at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or 5 p.m. Central European Standard Time. If you've not already registered for the May 7th satsang, please do so through the Sacred Attention Therapy website or by emailing me at info@sacredattentiontherapy.com. You're invited to submit your questions in advance of the next satsang, and you can also submit your questions via email to info@sacredattentiontherapy.com. Thank you again, Richard, and for everyone else, and to everyone else for being with us. Until next week, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.